本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。What's good, Internet? It's Friday, September 25th, and you're listening to Waypoint Radio, episode 349. Is that right?
So close. So close.
What was it?
348.
That's not true, because you did the episode on Monday.
That was 347.
Why did my document already say 347? Did someone come into my document and make it 347?
Someone might have.
I probably did when I
Yeah.
prepared to read that intro.
That's fair. That's fair. I see.
Did
I
you
thought
use your editing permissions, you son of a bitch?
Did you fucking come in here? Oh, I see. Then it says here we were probably going to skip this episode because we just finished up Save Point 2020, our charity marathon for national bailout. Thanks. Okay.
Sure, Austin, that was all improvised. I just said that off the cuff
I see.
as part of my natural delivery.
I see. Well, here we are this Friday, and I think you can probably tell I'm still fucking beat from that stream. I did an all-night overnight stream day, and I'm still paying for that. Also, I fucked up my shoulder. Don't get old, kids. I mean, the world would be better if it meant that we all got to grow old and achy and, etc. Anyway, we're here, and what I'm really setting up is we were not going to be here on Monday. We're taking a day off, the day off that Rob did not get on Monday, that Cado did not get on Monday, that Patrick and Cado did not get on Monday. I'm taking it on Monday, this coming Monday. So don't look forward to an episode this coming Monday. Instead, look forward to this episode right now. We're doing this one. We didn't skip this one, so that's good. I have not been sleeping great. I feel like doing the all-nighter shifted my schedule such that I'm still struggling to just get back to a normal, which is part of why I insisted on doing this episode this week and not next week, was this would force me to be awake and productive before noon. So that's what this is. We're being productive now.
I'm glad we can help
Austin,
you.
our value is
shift
not
your schedule
contingent
back.
on us being productive.
Wow. That's
I
so
will
nice
say,
to hear.
One of the things that, speaking of the theme of like aging, is that I feel like I used to be able to shake off all-nighters just fine, where it's all right, I'll just go to bed early the next night and I'll be good to go. And now like resetting everything to feeling like normal is like a multi-stage campaign.
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
Like, all right, it's 6 o'clock. I should probably have the chamomile now. I'm going to turn off every screen in this house. It's too stimulating. Well,
so this is what I fucked up. What was the day after my all-nighter was the finale, which meant we finished at like 10:30-ish.
Right.
By the time we did a light debrief, or 11 by the time we did like a light debrief and stuff, and finished like saying thanks to the mods privately and blah, blah, blah. Like, that was hyper stimulating. That was not chamomile tea at 6 p.m., which meant I was then awake until like 3 or 4 that night. And then I slept until 1 or something, which is way too late, even for me. And so now I'm in free fall. I'm just trying to grab something to just pull myself right. The other thing is, I haven't hit the point yet, Rob, where you were saying you can't do them without that campaign of trying to get back on track. I haven't hit the point where I can't do it at all. I almost wish I had fallen over the side of the cliff such that, okay, now I can't even do the all-nighter. It's not even a thing I can joke about doing. There's no way I could do it. We got to the end of that XCOM stream, which was the end of my all-nighter, and I was like, I could do another 6 hours. I could just stay up all day. I could just do that. And I believe I could have done that. It would have been very unhealthy, but I had it in me. I hadn't even opened my Red Bull yet. Like, I didn't even dip into I had one iced coffee at like 10 p.m. or something. Like, or maybe it must have been later than that. It must have been when we first started, which was like midnight. And I was like, so I had caffeine reserves on deck. I was ready to go. But I haven't, I need to maybe I should just make that claim. Maybe I should just start lying to myself and saying I can't do the all-nighter anymore, recognizing that the cleanup of the catastrophe is part of the catastrophe itself,
I think it kind of depends on if you got those good support systems to help get you back on track. Right. I think for me, it was easier adjusting after the live stream because one, I didn't do an all-nighter in that way, right? Like my thing was getting up early enough to be part of the XCOM stream.
Right.
But it was easier for me to sort of snap back just because, the dog will not let me sleep past 6 a.m.
Right.
And so it kind of helps that I got this little asshole creature that will be like, I don't care how you feel. You need to take me out or I'm going to do something very unpleasant.
Right.
And so, I'm actually recovering pretty nicely. I'm fairly, I feel great, to be honest.
Good. I'm glad.
It's taken an intensive, an intensive regimen of various stimulants and sedatives and good sleep hygiene and boring mysteries that I read before bed. And it's got me right as rain.
How are you doing, Cado? On the two extremes of Austin to Rob, the Goofus and the Gallant, where are you?
I'm all right. Because I ended up not staying up too late. I forced myself to get off after I handed off the midnight stream every night. So it was more that I was basically behind the scenes every other waking hour of my life that weekend. So it's like being sleep deprived, but not really. Just wired up because I was awake and on guard in a way. We're doing production and watching something. You think it's just you're watching the stream. It's no, I'm watching for signs that the stream is about to maybe go down or that something weird is happening on my network. It's being ultra alert for a very long time. So I'm tired and I'm very excited to take some time off to kind of just reset because it was we went from a regular work week straight into save point through the weekend, back to a regular work week.
Yeah. This is the difference from an E3 week where that lead up week is stressful because you're figuring out details. But in general, there's not a lot of news. Things can be a little bit more chill. And then you come back and you're just you're wiped. Yeah. And it goes into a weekend. So you're all right, I'm going to spend the next 3 days just floating. And that is not this week. This week, y'all kicked it off by talking about the Bethesda stuff. And then,
Microsoft was having none of that shit.
No. Save who? No. Don't care. Don't give a fuck.
No, and then today, actually, we got more news. Not Microsoft scale at all, but Mike Morhaime has started a new publishing company,
right?
With a bunch of other Blizzard senior staff. So it's a publishing company with two studios living under it, Dreamhaven, and the two studios are Secret Door and Moonshot. Dustin Browder's part of it. Chris Sagatti, a lot of the dudes who made up OG Blizzard, and I'm I don't think I share the same sentiment about Blizzard that a lot of people do.
I don't know what that means at this point because
maybe that's it too.
Yeah, go ahead. You tell which sentiment do you not share?
I think for a long time there was this idea that Blizzard were kind of the master craftsmen of PC games in some ways. They weren't necessarily always on the cutting edge, but the most refined, right? The most polished, playable, addicting experiences. Whatever genre Blizzard was stepping into, they were about to definitively school everyone else on how you make it just utterly captivating and charming. And I never I don't think a lot of the games resonated with me quite that deeply. I will talk until I'm blue in the face about how good the Warcraft 3 campaign is, right? But at the same time, I liked Diablo, but it didn't define, my late 90s the way it did for some folks. I also found that sometimes Blizzard design approaches could be a little bit conservative or just because something's very playable or addicting doesn't always mean that feels like time well spent when you step back from it. And that's kind of where I came out with Blizzard. I think World of Warcraft was kind of where I started to part ways. When Blizzard started becoming a World of Warcraft company, I was increasingly less interested in what they were doing. And it wasn't hard to see like the sort of the way that Blizzard would sort of play to certain stories. Our friend Apple Cider Witch wrote a great piece for us about the repeated leitmotif of good girls gone bad in Blizzard games. And like this started to become apparent and uncomfortable, through the early 2000s, where it's like, oh, she's so she's turning evil too now, huh? Okay. Wow, that lady's just so angry. She was good, but like she got so angry and now she's got to destroy everyone. Wow. She like women just kind of this genocidal impulse in them. Don't know what that's about. And so I do think that like if you look back at the oeuvre of Blizzard, I think you can find a lot of cause for criticism for like the text of their works. But at the same time, I do sympathize with people, and I'm to a degree I am one of these people who do feel that like over time it does feel like Blizzard became less and less interesting post Activision acquisition. And their room to try new things or continue serving like smaller parts of their portfolio was really diminished, right? Like I think for a lot of people, the debacle of Warcraft 3 Reforged was a real clear signal of how Blizzard's priorities had shifted, where this was a remaster where they'd come out saying they were going to set a really high bar and really give this classic RTS game some love. And then it was clear, like palpable when that game came out, that the new regime had basically like cut off resources to that project and kind of just dumped a half-finished thing out on the market. And I think that really kind of encapsulated Blizzard's relationship with a lot of their core franchises that were no longer necessarily things that were of interest to Activision as much. RTSs, that kind of stuff. And now it was increasingly about how can we continue, capitalizing on what momentum Overwatch still has. What's our next big, microtransaction driven game, right? That kind of started to feel like the direction things were headed, and a lot of the experiences that maybe you loved from Blizzard in years past would be much harder to come by.
I'm curious what I'll say is let me just preface this by saying whatever you've just set up is in terms of your sort of ambivalence around Blizzard. I'm even probably more ambivalent. Like they were always just another developer in the pile for me. I never had that transcendent moment with them. I liked Warcraft 3 quite a bit. I played StarCraft and enjoyed it. I played the Diablo games. I played Diablo 1 and 2 while I was coming up. And I played The Lost Vikings. I liked The Lost Vikings. That game's all right. But I would have never listed them in my favorite list of publishers. And then less so probably in the last, in the era of Blizzard Ascendant, which is to say post World of Warcraft, right? Like, WoW never was the MMO for me. I was always throwing myself at stranger things that are like probably less polished, less good.
I feel like you would be a Dark Age of Camelot,
right? It's like Dark Age of Camelot and Shadowbane, and I was a taster. I was an MMO. I was tasting some Asheron's Call. I was tasting some EverQuest. I threw myself into EverQuest a lot when EverQuest dropped. But after that, like I was very much bouncing from MMO to MMO. Guild Wars, I spent my time a lot of places, but WoW was never that thing that kept me coming back to it. And so when it came time for the last decade of Blizzard, that, the StarCraft 2 through Diablo 3 through whatever, Overwatch, Hearthstone. Hearthstone is probably the one game that I still have fond memories of from when I played it that felt like an intervention. I mean, Overwatch, I think, is absolutely also an intervention in the first-person shooter. I think it'd be unfair to say it wasn't. But Hearthstone felt like, okay, we're going to get people into card games, whereas Overwatch felt like a response to to the kind of constant presence of the first-person shooter and the multiplayer first-person shooter as established by huge franchises like Call of Duty and Team Fortress 2 at that point in the PC space. Hearthstone felt like, okay, we know cool things are happening in the CCG space, the physical CCG space, but nothing's hit yet in the video game space for card games. And that's a game that also felt like it had some of the most interesting young design talent on it, tackling things like, well, what makes a physical game different than a digital game? How can we use the digital space to do interesting things? Blah, blah, blah. And what I'm curious about now, looking at this new publisher and these two new studios, I know there are some Hearthstone people on it, but more broadly, the thought I keep coming back to is like, maybe the part of the thing that makes us attracted to people is this is a lot of old Blizzard talent. What makes me go like, okay, cool, is that it's a lot of old Blizzard talent. And I've seen what old Blizzard talent does, and it's not necessarily for me, or it's fine. Like, okay, yeah, cool, maybe they'll put out a game that I kind of like. But that doesn't rock the waves for me the way, you know, if there was something else attached to this, if there was some sort of like, and we're teaming up with these new developers who you actually really, really like, or there was some sort of like, maybe if I had a better understanding of what the situation was at Blizzard now and what was happening behind closed doors to, here's what I will say. Why should I believe that this set of people, unmoored from Activision, which I'm sure is a negative influence, will still end up actually making something I care about versus just continuing to pursue designs that feel kind of old school? I think a lot about Outer Worlds. Outer Worlds is the thing I keep coming back to. Outer Worlds was the like, listen, the people who invented Fallout are going to make a game that is not, you know, caught up in the kind of budget problems that New Vegas had, the sort of weird, you know, oversight stuff that demanded that they do XYZ, that had the time to be finished and as polished as possible. And then Outer Worlds came out, and I mostly felt out of date and out of touch, and like it wasn't doing anything new. Like, I think there was some fun stuff there throughout. I had an all right time throughout it, but I kept feeling like this tastes old. You know, this is an old recipe. And so when I look at the list of talent on the Dreamhaven board and I look up like, oh, okay, this person worked on this and this and this, it's a lot of old talent. And I'm glad that seniority exists in you know, the world of video games, because it's one of the major problems. I'm glad that there are a lot of senior people here, but that to me just makes me wonder, okay, am I going to be playing a game that feels like Diablo 2? And maybe if you're listening, you're like, I fucking hope so. I haven't gotten to play a game that feels like Diablo 2 in a long time. And if so, like, Godspeed. You know,
Path of Exile.
Right. Sure.
No, but I think, I also think to a degree, sometimes I get a feeling that there are almost like grad school dynamics in game development as well, where at a certain point, you've just been senior for so long that you've moved into sort of the detached PI role, where like your job is more involved with funding than it is being down in the trenches. And that's fine, but like often it means that the people who are like hands-on design, like building new experiences, do need to be closer to that, you know, you know, that development line, than a lot of really senior people. And so I think a lot about there was this, comic series called PhD Comics, and there was there was one that really sticks out in my mind. It's the old PI comes into the lab and he's like, I'm going to show you kids how it's done. I haven't been happy with, you know, the output lately, and I'm just here to help and clear some roadmaps. And he looks around the lab and he looks at something. He looks at a piece of equipment. He's like, what the hell is that? And somebody's like, that's an oscilloscope. And then the rest of the panel is just like a dead silence, as the guy realized he no longer knows what an oscilloscope looks like. And I think there's a similar thing with like development tools, right? And you know, the craft. And so I do kind of wonder when I see this group of people. You know, I was certainly my heart was broken by the what we saw happen with like other side games, where like, you know, okay, we got a bunch of, you know, old veterans of immersive sims, and there's, you know, ties to the Looking Glass lineage, and here they are, they're back, baby. And it's kind of a disaster. And I don't know if that's because the skills atrophied, they weren't like up to speed on new tools, or maybe they just didn't have funding. I don't know, but it wasn't as easy as we'll just get some of the old band members together and it'll be like the traveling Wilburys redo. That's not what happened, and that is trickier. That is a trickier proposition than just slapping some big names together. It
makes me wonder, is there an example of this happening where people have come out really happy with what has been made? I'm struggling to figure out what that might be, but
I think if you say, yeah, sure, like Outer Worlds was kind of underwhelming, but I think overall people have been kind of happy with like how Obsidian has maintained. Yeah, like overall, I think there's a lot of people who will stand Path of Exile. That's Obsidian, right?
Yeah, Path of no. You're thinking of wow, why am I blanking on their
there's
other...
Obsidian, there's In Exile, and there's
I have no idea who makes Path of Exile.
Not
that
Path of
is
Exile.
That's what I'm saying. You Path of yes. Pillars of Eternity.
Yes, Pillars of Eternity.
That's Obsidian. That's Obsidian.
Yeah, you said Path of Exile before.
Oh well, that's just because my brain is scattered.
Yes,
sorry.
That's fine.
Path of Exile is somebody else. It's cool though. If you like
Diablo 2. There you go.
You're like, I wish Diablo 2 never ended. Path of Exile. You will exile your life to grinding gear forever.
Right. In Exile, meanwhile, has been putting out like Wasteland 3 and Torment Tides of Numenera, and so they've also been in that like, get the band back together vibe. But yeah, like, I don't know.
I think there's a subtext to the Dreamhaven announcement that is like, hey, we basically weren't allowed to do things at Activision Blizzard.
Totally, which I do believe. Do believe.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think Activision has a pretty like ruthless mindset of like, is this going to be is the juice worth the squeeze, right? If is this idea probably going to be this order of magnitude of a success? If no, then we don't finance it because it's simply not worth investing in.
Well, and a success meaning a commercial success. Doesn't matter if it gets good reviews or it's like super innovative or anything. To them, that success they're looking for is specifically like as much profit as possible.
Yeah, well, Cado, I think you have a very unique perspective on this, given your Destiny love has been seeing a studio fight against that and then come out of it the other side, and now poised to release what seems like it'll be a pretty big expansion to Destiny 2 soon. When is that? When's that
That's
drop?
November 10th, and the changes that they're making are things that they've been on record saying that Activision didn't want them to do. Things like putting more RPG in the game, right? Like putting more like, oh, you can fiddle with these stats in a way that is recognizable to anyone who's played Diablo before, like things or any other RPG, right? Like they want to add more RPG into the game, and they were saying that a lot of times they've hinted at not being able to do things like that in the past. Like you could see the trajectory of Destiny 1 and the kind of systems they added and how many of those systems were completely scrapped when Destiny 2 came out. And then how many of those things are even more complicated and more kind of fiddly in that way. Things are coming back in November now that they're out from Activision's purview.
Yeah, and I think that's probably evidence enough that what we'll see. Here's what I will say: is it will be very interesting to see what these folks make without that, without those demands being made of them.
Right.
My hope is that I'm like wildly surprised and endeared to whatever it is that they make. That it does have that sense of exploration, of the form, like trying out some new stuff. Those ideas that have been sitting in the closet because you don't want to give them to the company that like you don't trust to let you actually execute on them.
Right.
Nobody would do something like that.
No, who would do that? Who would have a file filled with ideas to use one day?
Is that even legal? I don't.
That's probably. I think it's legal if you send it to yourself in a post-dated envelope.
Right.
Then it becomes not only legal but super legal.
Just
super cool.
Yeah.
Look at all these good ideas that I can only document today. Wow, just bursts of inspiration.
I asked a lawyer and they said extra legal, and I felt like that meant good. So
when lawyers say something is extra legal, that means it's just incredibly cool, and they're blown away. Frankly.
They're blown away. Like, whoa, whoa, dude,
whoa, bodacious, bodacious brief.
We should start a law podcast called Bodacious Brief. So let's go.
Well, there's another one for the fucking file, I guess.
if there were a pile of good ideas, then put this one, which is emblematic of how good these ideas are, on it. Bodacious Briefs, a podcast about, I don't know, becoming a lawyer. What if Cado, do you all want to start a podcast where for the next year we study for the bar exam?
Let's become lawyers.
Let's become lawyers.
Oh, shit.
You've heard the McElroy brothers will be in Trolls 2. Well, get ready for Waypoint will be in the National Bar Association. Oh God, it's just us freaking out, just like deep anxiety over test prep and bad early results.
It'd be like the Paper Chase meets like a David E. Kelly show from the 90s.
Yeah. God. I'm watching Perry Mason, but we can't talk about Perry Mason here right now. We'll have to do that on a different show that doesn't exist. Okay. If only there were a show where we could. Is that actually what that show would be just talking about legal
Masonic
shows?
Lodge. Boom.
Boom. Done. God. All right. Anyway, other quick news from today. Do you all have any other final thoughts here on Dreamhaven?
Just one last thought.
Yes.
I don't know if this is solvable, but I'm hoping, like, if they're like, here's a bunch of ideas that we just weren't free to chase down while we were Blizzard. I don't know if they're comfortable being like a mid-tier publisher, like on the scale of like a Focus Home type thing, or a little smaller. Like, it does feel like, oh boy, that's going to be where interesting things are allowed to happen in the game space, because the consolidation, like we talked about this on Monday, I don't know where all these studios who are owned by Microsoft, who like will be serving Game Pass, I don't know what that model brings us in like 5 years when it's standard. Mm-hmm. I simply don't know what it sustains. I don't know the decision making behind any of it. And so like, I do kind of feel like, as we're watching all these studios getting scooped up in these acquisitions, I'm like, boy, sure, bring on new publishers that are willing to operate on a smaller scale with thinner sales.
Do we have the sense yet that they're going to operate as a broader publisher, or if that is just kind of that it's a clearinghouse for the studio talent that they are building internally? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think based on the announcement, your supposition is probably the better one. Okay. Because for one thing, Emmanuel asked this. He was like, "Can you sort of tell what these two studios will be doing based on the CVs of the leadership?" And I really can't, because both studios have deep connections to both Blizzard RTSs and to World of Warcraft and to Hearthstone. Yeah. So it's not like you can say one is like, here's the old RTS dudes, here's the Hearthstone dudes. It doesn't break down along those lines, which does make me think, at least as of right now, you will probably have a great deal of like interoperability in like within that publisher, right? That I'm not sure they are set up to like acquire more studios or like be a publishing label for completely independent and unconnected studios. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that's the model they're pursuing, but it's day one, right? Like that could change, but probably we'll know what that looks like once they've got a release under their belts.
Yeah, that makes sense. Other short news things. They put the worm in No Man's Sky. They did it. They said it couldn't be done. I mean, first they said we're going to do it, and then they didn't do it. And then other people said it couldn't be done, or they said they lied to us. They said they took out the worm, and that's why you can't trust them. I was looking for a rhyme there, but I couldn't think of anything. I was looking for like the worm dies, Sean lies, like that style of Sean Murray of Hello Games.
Frantically, like, is there a Cypress Hill riff I can make? What about Dennis Rodman? Can I connect those two things?
I probably could. But there's a new No Man's Sky update that is out now called Origins, which is like their 3.0 big yearly update. I guess it's probably the first one was not this became yearly 2 years ago, because it was Next 2 years ago. Then last year was Beyond, and now Origins, and it's like, they're adding billions of new worlds basically to the map as it stands. They're just like filling every solar system with more planets that have the long and short is like more interesting, like geometry, but like more interesting world shapes, plus megafauna, plus volcanoes, plus some new UI adjustments. It seems like a really big update. I'm very interested in it. I'm going to try to put some time aside this week to dip into it, or next week. We'll see. Depends on time. But that stuff seems cool. Cado, did you check this stuff out at all?
Yeah, I looked through the patch notes and stuff, and
I love their patch notes. Their patch notes are so pretty. Their patch notes are like big and colorful, and
lots of images, nice. Which is very helpful. Just kind of parse what the text actually means, when you get a list of patch notes, like, well, how does this actually, look in game? So.
There's like that one bit of like new atmospheric illumination conditions, new lighting basically on certain planets, and just like seeing those screenshots of like, oh wow, yeah, these are different moods than exist in the game currently. Yeah, is really cool.
This feels like the most this is a live game update that they've done, I feel like.
Yeah.
Right? Like the other ones added so many kind of like new mechanics in a way that was like, oh, this is them filling out the like mechanical space in this game in a way that they wanted to.
Here are derelicts that you can investigate.
Now you can build bases. Now you can whatever, et cetera, and this one feels the most like we're making new content in a way in the procedural sense for people who have been playing, so that there's something new to kind of find, right?
Yeah, totally.
Like, and like, UI updates and like new stuff that will be new,
quality
but
of life stuff, and
but it is that sort of model of like, these are improvements, not additions to mechanics, but improvements on what's there, and also like tweaks that make things like fresh to explore, but isn't going to change dramatically the way the game plays anymore. Like the jump to having base building is like a huge one, where like before, like you and your ship were it, right? This doesn't have anything like it in there, but it's still exciting because of what is added. Just looks really nice. Like, looks like enough to like pull me back in for another couple of hours, which is what happens every time one of these updates happens. Who knows? I think I didn't play as much of the last update, so I'll probably stick around a little longer.
That's my thought too. I also kind of took a pass on Beyond.
Yeah.
Largely because like one of the biggest things there was just the VR, and it's like, I'm not going to play this game in VR probably.
Right.
So that didn't really do much for me. I will say I'm very excited. There are new colossal archive buildings to go to where you can recover cultural and literary histories. I'm ready, baby. Give me that lore. Let me know what the fucking cool, monitor head people's face, monitor face people, not head people. I guess their heads are also just monitors, huh?
The Kovac?
It's not Kovacs, is it? What is it?
Is it not Kovac?
Maybe it is. Oh, is it just Kovac?
Kovac.
I'm checking. Korvax.
Okay.
Korvax. Much better. I want to know what their poems are like. Tell me about their poetry. Let me get that. I'm very curious about like all that style of world building stuff, and glad that they're doing more of that. So yeah, that'll be fun. And then what was my second news? I had another news. Let me look at my notes. Not real news, like hey, here's Cado. Umarangi Generation DLC.
Yes.
For people who missed it, Cado and I did an incredible, really fun Umarangi Generation stream as part of the Save Point this year, where we used a prompt generator, like an art prompt generator, to inspire us to go take photos in the levels of the game that were not just like the traditional like in-game prompts. Like the in-game prompts are like, take a photo of 3 feathers, find, markers, find a picture of markers. And that's like not bad. But this was like, shoot a picture of anxiety.
Yeah.
Shoot a picture of
shyness.
Shyness. A movie opening. Like some stuff that was like, there's not a movie opening on this map. Right. We're going to have to figure out what that means and how we're going to interpret that.
Yeah.
That was really fun. But they just announced a new DLC for it called Macro. And it's also coming out on Switch. The whole game is coming out on Switch. And this new DLC looks great. This new DLC has a bunch of really cool shit in it, including one of the things you asked for.
Yeah, being able to take different kind of levels of prone and crouching to get lower angles, which is great. Just like more creative, options. I'm also really excited about making the game into a partial Jet Set Radio game by adding skates and spray painting.
Spray painting. Yeah, the fact that they just straight up added spray painting is great.
Yeah. I'm excited to draw shit
new
all
music,
over walls.
New location. Yes, totally. Same. And that game has just gotten more relevant and more important to me as the years continued. So I when we first played this game, we were still meeting in person. To do this podcast, Cado. Now we are not.
No.
So
you'll never be allowed to use that studio again.
Probably not. Probably not.
Does it exist? Who knows?
Who knows? God, remember damn, this fucking year. Anyway, I'm just remembering.
Are you thinking that's when we had like 8 people crammed in there for end of year?
Yeah, I was thinking of the fact that there's a different studio space that we had set up this year.
Oh,
remember?
The new studio.
We have a new studio space. We have a new studio space.
Oh, yeah, I saw
podcasting.
That.
We podcasted
Sorry, in my head, it's
Me
still
too.
the closet.
I mean, it was still the closet for most things. It was still that little baby room for most things. But we did.
Yeah, but the boardroom.
But the boardroom was nice, and we'll never use it again.
No, that one we might legally be allowed to use. Maybe. The closet, no.
The closet's a closet.
No one can go in there.
If they put some glass partitions up, like we're all like tiny little bank tellers in the boardroom now.
Okay,
there you go.
Then we'll be good to go. I've watched ESPN. I know how they're doing it. It'll be fine. You just get a little exterior ventilation.
Can we just get those the ones that cover that like you wear low in your neck and it pops up? Do you know what I mean? Did you see those at the? Did you not see the photos from this West Wing event? I don't know if they're reshooting something. Is there a West Wing reunion? Like what? I don't know what the special is, but photos came out. Here it is. Let me get you these great photos of.
I need to brace myself.
I'm gonna give you this. They're all wearing these truly remarkable face shields.
Yeah, so
they look like
up from the bottom face shields.
They're up from the bottom face shields, and they have like chin guards and like metal straps around their necks. It's very weird to me.
This whole thing is weird. This feels cursed.
Yeah. Oh, this is big cursed. Absolutely.
What's his face doesn't have? Who? I forgot who he was in the middle.
Dooley Hill looks like he knows this is cursed.
Yeah.
Oh wait, there's more images.
There's a lot of images here. I'm going to close this. This is not our West Wing podcast. That doesn't exist. That's not on the secret pile. What else? Is there any other news?
God, I have such a good idea though that I want to run past you about that.
All right,
but
bring
anyway.
it. You don't want to do it. You don't want to air it right now.
We can't say it.
We can't say anything. You're right. We can't say device. You're right. Now, this is where we need to go to former Blizzard folks at Dreamhaven. What? Haven?
Right?
Is that right? Yeah, Dreamhaven.
Right? Yeah.
Sorry, it's tough when it's a new publisher plus 2 new studios to try to get all of those names straight. Because it's Dreamhaven, and then it's Secret Door. I don't remember the third one. I don't remember. Moonshot. Oh, like a Moonshot. Okay, fair. Mm-hmm. I'm shocked there isn't already a Moonshot Games. Truly shocked. All right, yeah, that's probably it in terms of new stuff.
Larian Studios renamed their Twitter Baldur's Late.
Wow.
To announce their delay.
Yeah.
Incredible. That's fine.
It's not a big delay. They're just delaying to October 6th.
Yeah, that's fine.
Apparently it's like for some stress testing. But
that's extra funny
cute.
Then. Yeah, that's
also
cute.
Though, I don't know why this has been like, I don't know why I started thinking this way in the last week, but I was like, maybe I just need to get into Divinity Original Sin. Maybe I need to do that.
I think you would like that.
And then Cam wrote a thing about Baldur's Gate 2, and I was like, that sounds good. Maybe I should get into Baldur's Gate. And so then if you think about what I'm committing myself to getting into, we return to the problem of sleep schedules and good sleep hygiene.
Yeah. I have no idea how long it would take you to beat all of the previous Baldur's Gate content.
Probably a minute.
Probably the rest of the year. Right? Like committed.
Yeah. Especially if I'm trying to do it.
Your job
especially if I play it my ineffable way, where I don't look things up and I don't check to see if I'm doing things the right way. And I can only imagine the cul-de-sacs that I would encounter trying to play through those games.
Those games are from an era where it was okay to have dead ends in content in that way. You know?
The main story is only 48 and a half hours, according to how long to beat.
Was that for Baldur's Gate 1 or 2?
2 days.
That's 2 days. Two easy days. That's light work.
I get this done. A weekend.
You could probably do the whole series in a week if you really tried. So, come on. God. All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk about some stuff we've been playing, and then get into some emails. That's my suggestion for this very weird energy podcast.
It's good. I like it.
Yeah. Me too. I feel like this is very much like a sip your coffee, let Twitter stream, just kind of hang out. You know, it's not quite Hot Mike Mornings energy because it's lower key than that.
Right.
But it's like cool Mike afternoons. You know, like a little chill. It's kind of rambly.
Mike Mornings.
What was that?
Fall
like, Mike Mornings. Yeah. I got
that.
It's nice
air. Out. It is nice.
Yeah.
See, that's how we bring Mike Diver back into the podcast.
That's how we bring him back.
Family. Cool Mike Mornings. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hey, Mike, what's up? What's going on over there? How you doing? All right, let's take a break before we derail even further. I watched that Dragon's Dogma anime. This will be quick. I watched it. It's bad. It's not good. They built it around a premise that you can see in the episode titles. The episode titles are named things like Sloth and Lust and Gluttony.
Yes.
And there's 7 of them. And it's like, you know, there's not really any of that style of storytelling in Dragon's Dogma, the game. I guess the dragon speaks in Latin at you a little bit at the very top. That's about as close to the 7 deadly sins as it gets. But it's not doing what the show is doing. And this will be quick again, which is just like every episode is an exploration of one of the great human frailties. And it's pursued with just kind of wild and reckless abandon in a way that I think is trying to be grim and serious the way a certain subset of like dark fantasy anime is, which of course ends up including a lot of the strange like misogyny and sexual violence. Not a lot of, but there are episodes that go in that direction of some dark fantasy anime stuff that again is just not in Dragon's Dogma. This is not from that. This is definitely a team that's like, we got to spice this shit up. We got to be edgier. We got to be darker. And that it's disappointing. It's cool when the character uses the moves from Dragon's Dogma because the moves are cool. They do their best to take 1 or 2 key elements of Dragon's Dogma lore and put it in the game. And as like a Dragon's Dogma fan, I am able to look at it and be like, ooh, what if this is a tease of a class in Dragon's Dogma 2? Ooh, what if this ending is setting up a structure for Dragon's Dogma 2, which does not exist probably as much as I hope it does. We will see. It's TGS time, so maybe by the time this goes live, there will be a Dragon's Dogma 2 announcement, and you'll be able to tell how low I am now versus how high I am then, how important that is to me. But I'm trying to make peace with myself that we're not going to get a Dragon's Dogma announcement this year, and that this anime is bad enough that even Capcom would look at it and go, yeah, we can't announce shit right now. We gotta let this let the heat die down on this.
Just let the room clear.
Just let the room clear. We'll talk about this shit next year. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. But that's on my list of things video game related that I've been putting time into. There was that. I did my duty. I watched it. This is me recommending you don't watch it. Go play it instead. That game's still good. We did some segments of it on Save Point, and that reignited my love for the game, despite watching a series that was trying to snuff it out. Games that I think are actually good and worth your time. Y'all playing that Hades?
Hell yeah.
Hades is good. Hades is like really good.
Fucking whips. Turns out.
Did y'all talk about this on Monday? Because that's like when it actually dropped over the weekend, right? Or like last week?
Hades came up on Monday.
Okay. Well,
it's very good. So
I haven't heard Monday's episode. It's very good. There is the comparison I want to make to it is probably Dead Cells, which maybe that comparison came up on Monday. A game that I thought felt really good and had very little to keep me coming back to it after a victory. And I haven't beaten Hades yet. I've gotten close. I got through to like the final area before the final area, and like a room away from the boss, I think, in the final area, or the pre-final area rather. And that was like on my 5th run. Like I had one of those blessed early runs in a roguelike where you end up like getting a build that just kicks ass and you end up going way deep. You beat like 3 bosses and you're like, yo, I'm on a roll. This is it. I'm going. And that is the thing about it, is like the way that a build comes together throughout a run feels really, really interesting, and ends up being a little more explorative than most similar action roguelikes that I've played. Dead Cells, I ended up getting into like, okay, here's what my build is, even in games like, say, The Spire, I tend to like chase a certain type of build, and I think you could probably do it here eventually, especially as you unlock what are these things called keepsakes that help set up what your first like upgrade will be in some instances. But right now I'm in that stage where I'm just like, yo, what's this god give me? What's this upgrade do? What's this like? What are my choices here? What do the weapons look like? And there was so much to unlock on that back end, but more importantly, Supergiant, and I'm sure this was touched on, Supergiant does such a good job with character and world and music and voice acting and all of those things that like help contextualize the action. Every new loop just like is an opportunity to meet a new character or to talk to someone or to give a gift to someone and get some new piece of dialogue or to read some lore. And there was so little of that in Dead Cells that like I couldn't care about the world. I could only care about like the way the buttons made violence happen real good. And this has that too, learning how the spear works and like getting these combos off where you're like stab, stab, throw. And then you like pull the spear back from the distance. Like it's, Thor's hammer or whatever. Like that stuff feels so good.
The spear feels like the weapon.
Is that your go-to?
Yeah, 100%. Which is a problem because I don't get the bonus shadow material or whatever because it never seems to happen on the spear for me so far.
I think it happens. This is like my supposition,
right?
I didn't think it was random. I thought it was an encouragement to go to a new weapon,
right? Specifically.
So here's what I'll say: is my best run was the bow, a weapon I was not excited about using when I first unlocked it.
Yeah, I could not. My first couple runs were not good with it.
I got a Poseidon.
Mm-hmm.
I got a Poseidon upgrade, pair of Poseidon upgrades that was like knockback damage on the Y that kind of like spread shot, and then also something that pierced enemies with that, and that did bonus damage on knockback. So it became just this incredible room clearer. And it was like that plus some other stuff ended up being a build that made me really safe because I could get things away from me. I could stand in the corner and just draw people. That's what took me to almost beating the first boss the first time. But then, I think it was the spear build that got me to level 4, which was the big thing. It turns out that when you get a thing in a game like this that lets you heal yourself, it's powerful. There was some sort of, I think it was a chaos ability maybe that gave me like it cut my health by 40%, but gave you the ability to heal every time you do a hit.
What?
And so, yeah, dude.
What?
Yeah, going from like, you could heal 3 points per level and then spend resources on food every now and then to every hit gives you healing.
Jesus.
Was like, okay, well, if there is a build I'm going to chase, it's probably going to be this because I feel so comfortable just being really aggressive with this thing. Actually, maybe there was a sword build because that was also the one where it was sword plus the way this game works is you get you find these icons that connect you, these messages from the Olympian gods. The Olympian gods bless you, and each Olympian god has a sort of set of upgrades and to your basic attacks or changes to them. And those can kind of work together in contingent in interesting ways. So that was a build where I had Dionysus and Aphrodite stuff. The Aphrodite stuff made my like AoE attacks make enemies weak, which is to say that I think that they took more damage on subsequent hits and sometimes also did less damage after. And then the Dionysus stuff made like a big cloud of like sleepy gas and everyone just like was chilling out. You basically turned your magic blast into a magic lob that explodes into like a field of kind of like, drunk miasma, basically. And then there's a thing in this game where if you're going down, I guess it's if you're really balancing out two gods, or maybe it's just a luck thing. It must just be a luck thing. I got to a room where I had a gift from Dionysus and from Aphrodite, and whoever you turn down gets fucking pissed at you and challenges you to like a difficult fight, basically. And not directly, not a difficult fight with them, but like a challenge room, basically, with a special thing. Right. So the Aphrodite one was like I was being chased by an enemy the entire time. I did like an invincible enemy that was shooting things at me while dealing with other regular enemies in that room. But then I think I completed that and maybe I didn't get from that. Maybe the next room I went into, the next time I saw Charon, there was a duo ability available because their abilities do specifically stack in interesting ways. And that duo ability was both Dionysus and Aphrodite. And it said like anyone who was drunk on the Dionysus stuff would take extra damage from the Aphrodite attacks or whatever. Anyway, that stuff is all really good. And then also your character is just like flirting with everybody all the time. And everyone is just super hot and the character design is great. And everyone's sort of sad. And everyone's kind of like a weird, there's also lots of weird rivalries. There's all your uncles are like mad at the other uncles and like everyone's trying to be cool. You're cool, distant relative who wants you to come stay at their crib in Olympus. It's great. It's really good. Like I've been so hit and miss on Supergiant games over the years. This is like a strong hit for me so far. So shout outs to them. Congrats on launching 1.0. I'm glad I waited. I'm glad I can just be like, I'm going to throw myself into this thing until I beat it. And then I'm going to be done with it, but I'm going to beat it. I'm not just going to like get to a boss and be like, oh yeah, I guess I'll check back in on this and then never check back in on it. I'm going to like keep playing it because it is a real like hooks in you style game. Cado, I don't know if you have any other Hades thoughts.
I really love it, and I love Poseidon a lot because his knockback on dash. I made a dash build basically, where most of my damage was coming by dashing through and past people, which was fucking great because it was a run where I had a bow, and I cannot wrap my head around doing good damage with the bow and staying alive. So it's really neat how kind of varied and the different ways the gods kind of build on top of each other also is interesting. It feels like it's got that drip of every run. There's something you'll probably figure out something new. Even once, like I've gone through enough runs that I know what all the gods are. Like I'm not unlocking new gods, but then they introduce the fact that some of those gods stack in interesting ways and all that. Like it just like keeps having this like drip of new, fresh information every single run, in a really fun way.
Totally. The thing that I keep thinking about it in relation to is Star Renegades, a game I still really like quite a bit. But of the two, it feels like Hades is much more suited to the run-based structure, which I think is to say that there's more variation on each run, and that the encounter design is better suited to tile-based or proc-gen rooms and encounters, whereas Star Renegades feels so much like something that if it had just been a 12-hour RPG or 15, you know what I mean, 12 to 20 hours, and they said, you know what, we're going to release a kind of really cool stylistic or stylish RPG with a really sharp, look, and a really clever mechanic. The timeline mechanic in Star Renegades is so smart. But I would almost have rathered, each. So I've beaten Star Renegades once now, and that took me like 3 or 4 hours. And it's so easy to imagine a world in which that instead had been step 1 of a 12-hour campaign,
right,
or something like that.
3 to 4 hours total, or on that run?
On that run.
Yeah.
It's a long run. Like that's the thing. This is not an hour-long run game. I think it's an hour per planet, basically.
Right.
In my experience.
Yeah.
And then there's a fourth kind of final location, final boss situation. And all said, like, 4-ish hours, 3.5 hours, 4 hours on that win. And it's like, I really liked this a lot. It's probably in the running for my top 10 list this year, but I don't know that its qualities are as suited to me than going back. I think there's some really interesting stuff we haven't talked about in terms of what happens after you beat that game that I think is kind of spoilery.
I'm going into the fourth planet soon, so
okay, cool. So you'll know
once I know.
Yeah. So I don't want to spoil that for you. And there's cool stuff that happens there, but I don't think that there's enough difference in the characters level up the same each time. Maybe you pick different characters, and that's really cool. But now that I've unlocked all of like the base characters, I feel like I'm just kind of walking through the same steps and just hoping to get a good run to unlock some more stuff.
Right. It almost feels like they maybe. I mean, this is 100% speculation, but there's something about the way that it's structured that feels like it was maybe meant to be a linear thing, and then they were like, "Oh, this is gonna take too long," or like we don't have the resources to stretch this out past this like 4 to 5 hour mark. What if we make those runs, right? Like, what if we shift into a repeatable mode instead of like one playthrough sort of thing? Just because of how long it is, like that's how I can like imagine this coming together. Basically, is because most other games, when they know they're gonna be run based, like those runs are shorter. Like they just are, because the repeatability of it like comes from there being new interesting things each run, rather than runs being so long that even if 1 or 2 things do change, it doesn't feel that drastic between each run, right?
Right. Yeah. I also played some Risk of Rain 2 over Save Point, and then continued after Save Point, which was part of why my sleep schedule was not as good as it should have been. And ended up we beat that game on Save Point. Me, Joel, Natalie, and Kaz, one of our great mods. By we, I mean Kaz really carried us at the end to the final boss fight. But I will say the next night, or I think it must have been the next night, I beat the game with a different character, one of the characters I went on to unlock. And that game has like this is the other thing I was thinking about with Hades, is that the final boss fight in Risk of Rain is super, super, super cool. Again, I don't want to spoil it for people, but there's, you're being asked to respond to attacks in ways that the rest of the game doesn't expect you or doesn't demand of you. And there are some like really cool dramatic mechanical moments around the way you play your character and kind of how you've come to expect to play that character. For people who don't know, Risk of Rain 2 is a kind of a 3D like action RPG thing in the vein of something like a Dead Cells, or with the structure of something like a Dead Cells or a Binding of Isaac, except that you're in a third person perspective camera, you're jumping all around, you're getting upgrades that let you fly or boost, and there's like a huge kind of, or a large open environment for each level, basically. And also it all has the vibe of a sci-fi prog rock album, and also that's kind of what the music is. And in that, you have a lot to unlock, and there's lots of mysteries in the world and blah, blah, blah. But I wish that there were more, and I really liked it, but I really wish there were more boss fights like the final boss fight, because it really pushes you to know how to play your character in an interesting way, how to respond to things you don't expect, how to learn how to, do pattern recognition and all that stuff. And there's so little else in the game that feels like that. It mostly kind of feels like you're managing space and resources kind of normally. It's kind of like an onslaught of enemies or of various degrees. And so you're making sure that you're like not cornered. You're making sure that you're near stuff that can give you healing, or you're near stuff that can give you extra damage or whatever. And that you're going through your abilities in the right pace and stuff like that. But that's different than I'm engaging with this enemy who has this boss who has like a moveset that I'm trying to learn how to counter. And Hades does that every few levels. Like when Hades drops either an actual boss, it's a big deal, or even just a new enemy type where you're like, all right, what the fuck do these things do? There's like some mid-late game enemy stuff in Hades that I think is really fucking cool, that completely changes how you're dealing with space, and how your character moves. And it's just, I will not stop saying good things about Hades unless I shut up about Hades. So I'm going to shut up about Hades and suggest that we reopen our bad bosses and food rivalries email. You can send those to gamingadvice.com. Let me give y'all the link. Rob, do you want to read this first one in from Down Under?
I need that link, but yeah.
Boom, there it is.
All right, just right at the top.
Yep, from FB.
Fish and chips down under. I thought I'd throw an Antipodean story into the food place rivalry discussion. I come from a small coastal town in Australia where for many years the undisputed fish and chip spot was called Viv's Fish and Chips. On the coast, Australians tend to have strong opinions about their fish and chips, and as Americans do about diners or burger joints. Viv was the perfect local place, run by an older guy and his wife who charged $4 for a butcher's paper wrapped load of chips that could feed a family of 5. Viv operated out of a small shopping arcade only a few blocks from the beach, and the seating outside the small frontage was regularly full of kids from the local primary school. Anyway, about 15 years ago, the shopping arcade got bought out as the slow creep of sea change money from the major cities hit my town.
I don't know what that is. Does anyone here know what sea change money is?
No, that feels like a political thing. Sea change Australia.
It extremely does.
The last thing I heard about like Australian money was probably the Centrelink scandal, but yeah, I have no idea.
I have no idea
what this is. I found a TV show. Is
yeah.
This?
I doubt it.
No.
Maybe? No. There was a reboot.
I don't know what this is.
Me either. I don't.
All
anyway.
right. See, anyway, look, the point is there's some sort of Deus Ex Machina where there's sea change money arriving from major cities, and it's hitting this town. With the arcade on the auction block, Viv decided to hang up his apron. The story made the local paper. At the same time, a new contender for the crown of deep-fried seafood set up shop. This place was called Salt, and they sucked.
I understand what a sea change is.
What?
In the show, Sea Change. I think this is the original show and presumably the new version of it. Laura Gibson is a high-flying city lawyer, and she's prompted to undergo a sea change with her children Rupert and Miranda after her husband is arrested for fraud and is found to have had an affair with her sister. Laura then becomes the magistrate for the fictional small coastal town of Pearl Bay with its many colorful characters, blah, blah, blah. So it's like you're rich and you're living in a fancy city, and you're like, you know what? It's time for a sea change for me and my family. We're going to go to a little town by the bay. We're going to move out with all our money and like slide into...
Oh, so you're saying this is... Okay, so this is just Australian like white flight.
Yes, but also the reason they called that might be because of this classic TV show that they loved from 20 years, because it's from 1998 to 2000.
Wealthy people they're like, I've had it with the city.
I've had it with the city.
The Australian exurbs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Anyway.
All right.
Pick up from the beginning of that sentence.
Yeah. The place was called Salt, and they sucked. I'm trying to think of restaurants named Salt that I've been happy with. Anyway, they sold little burger-style portions of chips for $6. They didn't have fresh seafood, chilling and ice at the front, and rarely seemed to have kids hanging around after school. A few months after the transition to Salt, as the only fish and chip shop in my little town, the universal disdain for its upmarket pitch was evident when Viv came out of retirement.
Woo! Everyone is just clapping. Everyone's
passion
cheering.
for the old shop kept Viv in business for another 10 years, and the shop still runs to this day, I believe now owned by his son. Love all the work that you do, FB. Go
love
Viv.
It. Go Viv. I love a story where Viv gets to win. You know, the little guy gets to stand up to the Salt is such a, not to just use this term, it's such a sea change name. You know, you know what I mean? It definitely.
I can see the decor for this fucking place.
Me too.
I can see this fucking restaurant, and it's like tiny little like semi tapas style, semi gastropub menu. Just loathsome shit. God. Go Viv. Well, here's the other thing too. Fish and chips is like, you either are good at it or you aren't. You can't fake that. You can't ooh, look at the decor. People will fish and chips. Like, you gotta nail that shit. And if you're replacing if you're replacing the beloved greasy spoon, where they serve some good fucking fish and chips, then you got to bring it.
Yep, absolutely. Cado, do you want to read this next one?
Disgruntled
again. Yeah, disgruntled.
Whoa.
Boom.
Yes. Here is our awful boss story. I work at a municipal recreation/fitness community center where wages haven't gone up in years, and a position, which requires college or university completion, is now a minimum wage gig. The staff as a whole was disgruntled across all centers, and upper management's brilliant idea was to waste a weekend on a community morale building meeting. The meeting consisted of attempts at team building, icebreakers, and group activities like come up with ideas to boost gym memberships. Like work. The kick in the abdomen came at the end when when managers lined up and awkwardly read a script explaining that wages were not going up. This led to a question period where staff voiced their grievances about wages to the top boss, who responded to all questions with human answers like employee wages are the top expense of a business, and the Hawthorne principle states that employees are not motivated by money. People left the morale building meeting more angry than before. Nobody took the free pizza home. P.S. Damn. The centers have opened during the pandemic. This area is very conservative, and the older population hardly wears masks. Don't go to a gym during the pandemic.
I love that. It's a huge problem for us that employee wages are the top expense of the... Yeah, every business is going to have expenses, dude. The pie is going to be divided some kind of way. It is not my problem that, your business runs on employees. Go fuck yourself.
Absolutely. Fuck off. God. I had to look up the Hawthorne principle, a.k.a. the Hawthorne effect, which, if you're curious, you can go look it up and criticism of it up. That's my suggestion. Jem writes in and says, for just shy of 10 years, I worked as a software developer for a Canadian startup. Like most startups, the company was always looking for investors, so every so often, suits would fly in from Silicon Valley to poke around, hand out business cards, and ask us a few questions, and generally make sure the CEO wasn't just blowing smoke, which he always was, obviously. I can't count the number of times I was in a meeting where the CEO promised a client that our software could do something that it manifestly couldn't. For years, it was my job to scramble to try to turn his lies into something approximating the truth. One time in particular, an investor had just come in and had a long chat with our CFO. The CFO wasn't particularly happy with our CEO at the time, probably because I had just given him a technical walkthrough of our system, which demonstrated in no uncertain terms that the CEO was full of shit. All the higher-ups were worried that the CFO might say something undesirable, read true, to the investor, so the head of HR and the CTO hatched a plan. The CTO would pull the CFO into an impromptu meeting while the head of HR snuck into the CFO's office and stole the investor's business cards so that the CFO couldn't follow up with him. Because little pieces of card stock are the only way to get someone's phone number, I guess. Anyway, this plan worked for all of 45 seconds before the CFO stormed out of the fake meeting and caught the head of HR coming out of his office. He confronted her, and she cracked immediately. The CFO demanded that the CEO fire both the CTO and the head of HR, but this was complicated by the fact that the head of HR was also the CEO's wife. So it was the CFO, who was the CEO's uncle, who left instead. Cool stuff. The CEO and the head of HR later split up acrimoniously, but last I heard she was still the head of HR for the company. I think her actual training was in archaeology. I have dozens of stories like this. For a few years, the CEO decided to start calling employees partners and pretended to adopt a shared decision-making model, but refused to put anything legal in writing. Of course, when venture capital money came along, this whole partnership idea evaporated. The guy also had a habit of making people founders of the company retroactively. There was one founder who started working there 5 years after I did. I remember a presentation that the CEO gave where the slideshow called someone the Ford founder of the company, F4RD, like fourth, but 4RD, because the same presentation last year had called him the third founder, but the CEO had inserted another founder into the company's history in the meantime. Thank you, Jem. I'm sorry. This company is the reason I ultimately decided to leave the industry, and now in the midst of a global pandemic, I've just started my first year in medical school. Wish me luck. Good luck to you, Jem. An incredible story, top to bottom.
Oh my god, the gutlessness is just incredible. I could have a slightly. This is not even very awkward. It's just literally a, hey, could you not shit all over the company to the investor? Right. That's all you got to say.
That's all you got to say.
Yeah. And instead it's like, no, I got it. Fake meeting. Okay, so here's the thing: we need 3 people right in on this. Mm-hmm. All hold the fake meeting. Bernie Mac will sneak into the office and grab the ID. He'll give it to Matt Damon, who will then run it. Yeah, come on,
it's unbelievable. And also, I just love that she. Also, I love the idea that this is just the CFO and the head of HR, but no, the CEO is the husband of the head of HR. He definitely put them up to it, and then is trying to claim some sort of plausible deniability as not being involved. Absolutely not. It's 100%. All that whole family is in on it. Yeah, they all gotta go. I think that the CTO should have just had a coup, taken over the company, brought everyone else to a new company, just started fresh. I feel like this is the exact sort of bullshit that ends up leading to a big split. Anyway, great story.
So, I just want to shout out the person who wrote in about the fitness centers.
Yes.
And being told we got to control those employee wages, and people aren't motivated by salary. There was a good piece in The Nation a couple weeks ago by Robin Kaiser Schatzlin. It was sort of discussing a new book called Worked Over by Jamie K. McCallum. But basically, it's tracking when did this notion it's trying to track a lot of things around declining worker wages and just sort of the ideology that surrounded that and attended it. But the thrust of this piece is also, when did it start becoming a thing that you were supposed to love your job? You're supposed to be passionate and engaged. When did that become... we now take it as a truism, right? This is a thing that we're constantly told in school. It is a thing that when you go to a job interview, you will be asked in so many words to really demonstrate your excitement and passion for the job. So when did this come from? And so it's sort of tracking this movement back to the early 70s. And the early 70s where you can track a lot of stuff in the modern economy back to. And one of the things that this book sort of digs into is that in the 70s, you started seeing workers in industry basically just kind of becoming really alienated from their work. And really, because this was kind of the final refinement of the assembly line model. And so you had jobs that were hyper specialized, that were incredibly routinized to drive efficiency. But even more than workers like 10, 15 years ago, now you really did feel like a cog in a machine. And worker morale was starting to plummet because it is kind of mind-numbing. And you were starting to see a lot of problems attending that. And so there started to be some concern about like, hey, what are jobs doing to people? But instead of doing anything to reform that or change that, instead what we got was a shift at the corporate level about trying to tweak it so that people now had to convince themselves they loved their work. To quote from the article, management had to create the necessary philosophy to ease tension on the job or companies would lose productivity. That is, management didn't need to make the workplace better. It needed a new coercive ideology that would pay lip service to these new demands. Management took up this task with aplomb. After the 1970s, firms almost unilaterally began to stress the importance of loving your job. In 1962, a poll found that 6% of people thought success at work required a meaningful job. 20 years later, it was 49%. And so I just thought it was interesting as well, that this whole notion that like there's so many jobs we are forced to pretend, especially to get in the door, that like you're going to be hyper engaged. You're going to be excited to do this job. I've had those interviews where like, hey, you know, why are you excited to work here? And the answer frequently was, I'm not.
I'm not.
Dude, like I'm working at a liquor store and I need to get the fuck out. My boss just like caused his entire kitchen staff to walk out and things are fucked. I just need to get out. Yeah. And like the answer was, so how are you going to really apply yourself and your skills to this position in a content mill? How are you going to really engage with that? And I'm literally like, I just want to keep a roof over my head.
Dude, I'm just going to show up and do the work. Like, that's it. Yeah. That's what I'm going to do.
But if you say that,
work
you're
that
not
needs to
getting
get done. Right. Of course not.
Yeah. And so I think this is one of the other traps I think a lot of us are in, is you're kind of not like, I think work today requires a level of dissimulation that like would have been really fucking weird to our grandparents and their parents, right? Where it's like just walking in the door now, you have to pretend, man, sure am excited to be working at the widget factory.
Well, and the irony to that is one of the I think major stereotypes that is probably grounded in truth based on personal experience and the experiences of the people I know is that in our parents' generation and especially our grandparents' generation, you had folks who worked for one company their whole lives. Whereas I don't know that I know anyone who has been at one place for their whole career in our generation. I'm genuinely trying to think if I know anyone. Like nothing comes to mind as like a you know, in your 20s forward, do you stay at one place? It happens, you know, I guess here and there, but on the trend, you have people who are bouncing from job to job, whether that is at the office level or the retail level, or whether that is in, you know, our industry, bouncing from publication to publication, whether that is in banking, whether that is in, you know, academia, whether that is in, you know, working at restaurants. You don't have that life, that you're not a lifer in that same way, but you are expected to perform that sort of the dance of loyalty. You're supposed to pretend like you were already loyal to the place just to get the job to begin with, even though everyone involved should by this point understand that this is a temporary engagement. Even a long engagement will be a temporary one. There will be a point at which the break occurs. And that is so strange. And yeah, we live in a weird culture. And it's a culture that was created, right? Like, I think this is the thing that piece gets at is this didn't come from nowhere. This is a project that was that was pursued by people who wanted an outcome.
When is the moment you decided that you wanted to love your work? Can you point to it? Because I can't. Right. I can pinpoint the moment I wanted to be a writer. I can pinpoint my arc toward like I want to become a writer.
I think this is an ethos instilled in me by my parents, probably very much the like love what you do and you'll never work a day in your life type stuff.
But also your dad was an entrepreneur.
Correct. Right. Well, my dad was a retail manager for years. My dad ran, you know, sold suits at a men's, you know, a suit store, and then, you know, managed the clothing section or the men's section of a Kmart. And then, you know, I did all that stuff and saved up money and borrowed money from his family. And I was like, listen, I'm going to go into business for myself. And for him, he loved doing that. Like that, taking that swing swing was a big swing for him. And there were highs and lows in that experience in many, many, many ways. Because it turns out being a small businessman, showing that there was, for instance, in South Jersey, a desire for the, emerging FUBU South Pole, like that era of hip hop, pure players, Carl Kanai, like that style of like, urban fashion. You can do it as a small businessman, but only until, a big company shows up that has a bigger bank account and, deeper discounts from wholesalers and blah, 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 blah. And that's what happened, right? In a real way to that business anyway. And then, the rest of we do not need to do a blow by blow of my father's business career. Needless to say, my dad is now a good salesman for someone else's company now, selling, we don't need to get into what my dad does specifically. But he has now moved into part of his life where he's made that switch back. And I think that there's something really interesting. And it was very, in talking to him about whether or not I wanted to leave my full-time job at Vice, actually, we talked a lot about him trying to make that decision, going from something that was secure as an employee to trying to go into business for himself. And it was risky and probably cost him money in the end, but was him pursuing something where he did have the degree of freedom, at least, to feel like he was in charge and in command of his own destiny in some way. And that I think was different than the feeling that he had working for anyone else, where he knew very well that he was not happy going to work for Kmart. You know what I mean? And I think that there was a degree that was part of how that was instilled in me, was about like that sort of do what you want to do for yourself. And that is the part of it that I think was trying to be instilled in me. And yet I think maybe it came across because it was mixed in with the rest of the cultural messaging of find a job you love and you'll be happy and you won't feel like you're working, which is just not true. Like I love what we do. I loved what we did at Waypoint. I loved what I did at Giant Bomb. Like I loved being a teacher before that. It never didn't feel like work. Like it was always still work. It was always still long weeks and hard hours and frustrations and budget limits and all the shit that goes along with difficult people that you work with, and all that shit exists. None of that stuff goes away. And so yeah, I can pinpoint that, but what I think maybe the thing that's interesting there is that the actual lesson being taught, which was about autonomy, and about breaking away from the sort of like structure and finding a way to do stuff on your own, it was caught up in the broader cultural lesson of be a happy worker. And that's not what my parents were trying to teach me by any means, probably. The like, my hippie poet mom was certainly not trying to tell me that I would really like that my life would be easier if I just liked my jobs more, when she was giving me advice. That's definitely not the vibe. But I think it kind of sublimated itself because that's what that is the sort of way to make intelligible that advice, maybe in a market where you're like, okay, well, no, I'm going to have to go work for someone else. How do I do that in a way that doesn't feel so bad? But yeah, I don't know. I feel like, Cado, did you get the same arc of like someone teaching you that you should like your job, or was your family not that way? No,
because I got this kind of off. My parents worked so that their children could have a better life, and therefore job was about survival and not necessarily about any sort of passion. Like, they never conflated those two. And then also going to an arts magnet middle school and an arts magnet high school, where being a visual artist was kind of like the training that everyone was going for, was like, look, you're gonna need a day job. That is just how you get by, right? Like, it's because of the way society is currently built up and like does not value art in the same way, that you will always be working. But what's important is that you don't lose sight of having something that you enjoy in your life, right? Like, not letting your job become so all encompassing that you can't find fulfillment elsewhere. It became very much the like, you're gonna have to deal with a job, but being happy at your job was never a thing that was ever even like from neither from my parents nor from like the institution of school did I ever get the like figure out how to be happy at a job. It's like, you're gonna have to deal with it, give yourself the tools to deal with it, and keep yourself leave yourself with enough energy to follow something else outside of that purview, because a jobs are just about survival, right? It's just because we live in a capitalist society. It's just because we need money in order to survive right now.
Totally. I think some of this gets worsened because, like, I think deepening precarity means that you don't even get that breathing room, right? Like, I think
yep, totally.
That
and just general flexibility. The like, you're supposed to be working whenever I text you. That's when you're fucking working, right?
Yeah, yeah. Just that feeling of like, yeah, I think it's gotten way harder to be like, oh yeah, well, this is the day job, and then at night I pursue my passion. I think for a lot of folks, it's like, well, at night I do the other, like the night job, or the side hustle thing, because I'm just sort of trying to Tetris together my my monthly nut, basically, and I think that further changes things. So because I think about like, this arc, and when I was thinking about like what I don't want to do with my life, I looked a lot. I considered academia, right? Where I was like, that seems like stable. It seems like it gives you time enough to like have some passions, etc. That seems like a good place to go. But by the time I'm like approaching that decision, like, are you going to commit to academia? It's starting to dawn on me, and a lot of my professors are warning me like, hey, it's getting worse. The trends are not good, and like the thing that you see us, it's like it's all survivorship bias. Like, we're a bunch of people here being like, hey, we've got tenure. Our cohort isn't doing as well by and large, and it's just like the odds are getting worse. And I think about like, my dad, he worked at steel mills, and that gave him enough breathing room to attend college around that. And then that gave him an entry into business. And when business went bust, he was able to throw himself on the mercy of his old advisor and like complete his master's. Get like certified to teach. He like they like had to do the special dispensation. Like, hey, you went into a different career for 10 years. Yeah. And now you're basically saying you want to finish up that master's that you basically abandoned. But his professor, Dr. Trusty, God rest him, was like cool about it.
Great name. Good. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so definitely like had his back and got him a spot, like completed that master's, and he was able to start teaching at community college and like sort of build out a career from there. And it was all fine. It was all livable. And I look at like how everything has just gotten harsher and worse. And I think increasingly that like those margins have just gotten thinner. So like the thought of, well, I guess I'll teach at community college long enough to figure out what I'm doing long term. I think it feels like even that now has gotten way tighter and harder. And so I think this notion of, I can see where it would have made sense for people working in the 70s and 80s to start to think like, yeah, it would be good to find work you enjoy and that has meaning to you. And I think now we're sort of in a position where you can find lots of work that has meaning to you, but like giving space to lead a unstressed, not even unstressed, but just like a life where you're not terrified half the time, that's become much, much harder.
I'm curious to what degree I would be curious at what degree our listeners feel like they do have jobs with meaning, in the sense that like I think that there are more of those sorts of jobs now, in the sense what I mean is there are more jobs now. There are more ways to make income from creative labor, right? From immaterial style labor that is focused on creative work. Doing podcasting with a Patreon on the side, or doing, art commissions, or there are more ways to be able to make some money from doing that sort of work. And certainly the field of, for instance, the enthusiast games press is wider in some ways than it has been in the past. But I'm actually curious if there's also been such an uptick in the sort of gig economy stuff, an uptick in the other half of the immaterial labor stuff, the kind of service economy, phone banking, data entry, that style of stuff. That I would be curious to know, like, how many of you listening like your job, or feel that there is meaning in your job, which is a different claim than like your job. Because I can imagine liking a job in which I have liked jobs in which I am not really engaged and I'm not finding meaning, but it is a way for 6 hours to disappear. And then I get to go back to the rest of my life. You know what I mean? That feels good sometimes. So yeah, I don't know. And to see if I'm picking up what you're putting down though, despite the fact that you're finding meaning, what you're not finding is a stable income, good, some sort of long-term structure that you can count on for more than, a year at a time without feeling like the rug is going to be pulled out from under you, benefits that cover you and your family, all the stuff that you would have gotten theoretically from a good factory job 30 years ago. Right.
Yeah. Cause I think a lot about like when I was sort of, at my most successful as a freelancer, and like that shit was exhausting because it was just every week, like, okay, what are the in and out flows of money? What's happening? Which of these bills can I punt down the road?
Yep.
And so it was this weird, like, it was like for a long time, it took a while for me to admit this to myself, but like I was doing what I loved, right? Yep. So why was I sad and kind of miserable? And the answer wasn't because I hated the work. I liked the work. I liked my editors. I was just depressed by the fact that like I couldn't focus on that. The work never ended. It was that you'd finish work and then it was time to do the work of, okay, how do I make this sustain a life? And that was where it got pretty hairy. And it took me this ideology of like, hey man, like you love what you're doing. So you're ahead of the game. Made it really hard for me to recognize that like, yeah, but that wasn't quite getting the job done.
Mm-hmm.
Ahead of the game doesn't necessarily mean anything when the whole system is shifted so badly that, you're ahead of like full on bullshit, but it's like still shit.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
Like it does make it better, but that doesn't mean it's good yet.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna read this last email that was written by. In fact, is this even the right one? 1 second. I'm now being like, wait a second. So we got a few of these, I believe.
Okay.
Now I'm feeling like I fucked up.
No, hang on. There was one I spotted that just came in that felt like.
Oh, okay. Well,
I don't think it's related to a previous email, but it sounds like a similar deal. Can I read this one from Julia?
Yes.
All right. It's titled "Competitive Froyo and Divorce Brisket." Hey, Waypoint folks. If y'all are still interested in restaurant rivalries and boss stories, I've got 2 in 1. This email is a little long, so feel free to chop it up and read however much you like. It's not that long. You don't know what a long email looks like. You'll see some of the stuff we get. But I am going to change the names to protect the innocent here. My first job when I was 16 was at a frozen yogurt place called Pink Mango. The boss was a little weird and controlling in the boring way most bosses are. He made us text him for our individual schedules week by week instead of just posting them publicly, had me open and close alone at unsafe hours, would manipulate people into quitting so he didn't have to fill out the paperwork for firing them, that kind of thing. The store made very little profit because we opened literally next door to the already established local frozen yogurt place. Word is, the original place had previously wielded power with the city to get the beloved snow cone stand in the neighboring parking lot, which I also later worked at, to move 100 yards away because of some contract stipulation. Pink Mango had a loophole, though. We leased out of a United Supermarket, so they couldn't make us move because we were technically affiliated with that chain, and therefore not solely a frozen yogurt place. We got asked why we were stupid enough to open next to name redacted about 1 million times a day, and my boss always got obviously annoyed but never seemed to have an answer. Anyway, it eventually got bad enough for us to close down 1.5 years after opening. The way everyone found out, our boss and his boss emptied the place out at sunrise without so much as informing the supermarket or its managers, and laid us all off via text an hour before we were supposed to open. Aside from being involved in the oil and gas industry, the regional manager now runs a La Madeleine fast food casual chain in the south, think Panera but sort of French, in nearby Lubbock, Texas, which according to my relatives who live there, kind of sucks. Daniel, my boss, friend requested me on Facebook 4 years later. I didn't accept. Bonus story, people in my hometown used to rave about Jim and Bessie's barbecue until Jim and Bessie had a very messy divorce and split the business. He opened Jim's barbecue in a new location, and she literally scratched his name off the menus with Sharpie to make it Jim and crossed off Bessie's barbecue.
Oh my God.
I never hear anything about Jim anymore, but Bessie's is all right, and she owns an upscale steakhouse that makes bank. Good for her, I guess.
Good for her, I guess. Yeah.
Wow. I love the closing down your business like a thief in the night. That's good.
God, incredible. All right. I found the original email I was going to read. We got a few. I don't know if you remember this, Rob, but I raised briefly in conversation the inclusion of Satru, the name that is used in CK3 for a set of Norse pagan religions, or
yeah.
In this case, we got a bunch of emails in from a bunch of different people, and there are two I want to read that give a perspective from folks who have kind of more firsthand perspective than us that I think are really interesting. All right, so first it's from Morgan. Morgan says, I was super interested by your discussion of Assaultru in Crusader Kings III, episode 345. I'm of that religion myself, so I thought I might provide some context if that's okay. Sorry in advance for the long email. Assaultru, pronounced Assaultru, absolutely doesn't make sense as a term for the pre-Christian faith of Scandinavia at the time of Crusader Kings III. The problem is we don't really know what that religion was called at the time. There's a decent chance that there wasn't really a word for it, and post-Christianization, writers generally call it the old or pagan religion. It was also a very decentralized faith in that in some cases was almost unrecognizable from one place to another, so there's a lot of argument in Viking studies as to whether it makes sense to call it one religion historically. Assaultru in the modern day is a complicated word, especially because of the white supremacists who have adopted it. The term, which means faith in the Aesir, is the primary but absolutely not the only group of gods that are worshipped. Used to be the standard umbrella term for all Nordic paganism, but that's definitely less the case these days, at least in part because people understandably don't want to be associated with racists. There's a notorious racist group called the Assaultru Folk Assembly, who have done a lot of work to just sort of ruin everything they touch, and that has poisoned it for a lot of people. A lot of the anti-racist Norse pagan organizations use the term heathenism or just Norse paganism, but there's basically always a fight about which term to use. Odinist might as well be synonymous with white supremacist at this point. It's a huge red flag. Moderate/mainstream heathen groups absolutely haven't done enough to deal with the white supremacy problem in their faith, and while things are starting to change, it's taking longer than it should, and there's a lot of rot to burn out. Many heathens, including me, don't really associate with any of the big organizations anymore because of their hand-waving about racism and oppression. The work continues. Thanks as always for the fantastic podcast and for continued reporting on some truly incredible Crusader Kings shenanigans. Moose. Thank you to Moose for that one. And then there's a follow-up here, which took me by surprise. This one comes in from Petter, who says, Hi, I was one of the developers on Crusader Kings III, and I wanted to comment on the discussion about the name Assaultru for the Old Norse religion. The European pagan religions are unlikely to ever have had any centrally organized religion or institutions, so that's the way they're represented in the game. So the way they're represented in the game is fairly ahistorical. To be closer to reality, it should probably have come from a slightly different faith for every village, for different values and traditions. That has been flattened to accommodate gameplay with a religion system that also needs to support different types of beliefs across huge swaths of Eurasia and Africa. Assaultru was a term that in our eyes has this been inextricably poisoned by racist tests, but a lot of names for many of the European pagan faiths did not. With little really being known about the actual historical religious practices of pre-Christian Scandinavia, it's unfortunately easy for nativists or non-Scandinavians who like Viking aesthetics and racism to claim that it somehow represents their views. Thankfully, it also makes it easy to point out all the instances of stuff Nazis typically dislike, such as gender fluidity or divine race mixing, and tell them they clearly haven't actually read the few sources that we do have. They're not believers, they're just racist cosplayers with a fetish for largely imaginary warrior culture. Anyway, this whole email is set up to let any Nazis out there know that I hope the lesson you take from CK3 is that you're wasting your time hating other ethnic groups. You should be hating the ruling class instead. P.S. Since leaving CK3, I've been working on a number of other exciting things, such as Tony Hawk's Pro Crusaders 1 and 2. So, that I didn't... Of course, the person who made the Tony Hawk Pro Skater Crusader Kings mod is a former Crusader Kings dad.
Oh, fuck.
Also, a quick update. Skatrilineal Succession is in that mod now. You can become a skate legend to enable
Skatrilineal.
Yeah.
Oh, did you miss this? Yeah, there was like early request from a fan of this mod that was like, would it be possible to add Skatrilineal Succession to the throne so that it passes to the best skater in your dynasty? To which the mod creator, who I guess is Petter, said, I'll have to take it into serious consideration. At least I want to make sure it remains strictly historical, so it would be a massive oversight to omit Skatrilineal. It's so good to me. So thank you to everyone else. Again, there were like 4 other emails. They all basically said the same thing. One from William had this incredible note that I will also add. Death to capitalism, imperialism, the patriarchy, and fucking Nazis. No, that also I agree with. But William said, having grown up spending a lot of time in the northern Swedish countryside and hearing about trolls living in the woods, it equally amuses and annoys me to no end that the more interesting folkloric beliefs that survived through the centuries didn't need to be revived, like in trolls and the Tomtar, which are like these like, I guess, gnomes type creatures, and fairies basically get no attention from these pagans, in my experience, especially the racist ones. I guess they aren't as cool as high-powered gods and stuff. Yeah, absolutely. If I were to become a pagan, I feel like there's so much out there besides just like the big gods. Talk to me about your cool fairies. Talk to me about your weird gnomes. The Tomtar are apparently also called the Nissa, or the Nessa, I guess. I don't know. I'm on Wikipedia. I'm reading about these gnomes.
William's good on this. William, I think, wrote a really good piece that I've cited a bunch about Kingdom Come for RPS. Basically, like unpacking exactly why that approach to historicity is really dubious, and like how selective you have to be to create this like fictional setting that they've done. So yeah, William's a good correspondent when it comes to that field I like to call medieval shit and adjacent.
Shout outs. All right. On that note, we should wrap this one up. Thanks for joining us for this long talk about a billion different things today. This long, very tired discussion. We will be back not this Monday, but again this coming Friday for a week from today for our next episode. Thank you to Bowen for letting us use the track "Miss You" off the EP Pale Machine. Find out more about that at waypoint.zone/BOEN. Rob, where can people find you on the internet?
At Rob Zachney.
Cado.
At @A_Cado_appears.
Find me at Austin_Walker. You can find everything we do at twitter.com/waypoint. And I guess I should say, Cado, the archives of Save Point are already starting to go up to some degree, right?
Yeah. We've got McKay, who guested last year.
Shout outs to McKay.
Shout outs to McKay.
I just gave McKay the peace symbol. McKay can't see that. But
McKay will now hear it. Doing highlight edits like he did for 2019, and also just straight transferring the VODs over. And the first VOD is already up, which was the PS5 segment when we did the live reveal to that. There should be essentially a VOD transferred over per day, just like until we are through all the VODs at this point.
Amazing. I see here so top 10 Spelunky betrayals is up today.
Yeah.
Not the whole, I don't think that's the whole.
No, but an entire segment will go up later today.
Okay, good.
One of the, I'm not sure which one we're putting up next, but one of the staff segments will go up per day for the next until we get through them, basically.
Perfect. Yeah. So look forward to that. I'm happy we're getting those up pretty quick this year. It was such a blast. Save Point was so good. Obviously, I wasn't on the Monday show, so just a quick debrief. Thanks to everyone who came through and hung out. I hope people really enjoy the VODs, and I think we're going to leave the donation up link up for at least until the archives all come out, because I know sometimes in those archives we go, hey, can you go here and donate? And in the time since finishing that stream where we ended at like 144,000, we're up to $147,688.99. SavePoint.stream is the URL if you want to go donate and you didn't get a chance to before. You know what? I would love to hit 150,000. I know the marathon is over. I'm still grinding out here.
Yeah.
I want to give them a check that
go.
says $150,000 on it. That's big. That's, what's $147,688.99 isn't cool. You know what's cool? $150,000. That's how that line went, right?
Yeah,
that's how that goes.
That's exactly what it meant.
Yep. That's just what it meant.
What's cool? A slightly larger amount.
Just a little bit more money. A round number. That's what he meant. He meant like you got to round it off. That's it. Sorkin dialogue we all know and love. All right. On that note, as we always say at this time, fuck capitalism.
Gotta get to Nashua. What?
What? That's what we say. Go home.
Like we always say.
Oh.
I do not like it. I do not like the mask.
Certainly such a thing should be understood as a high quality object.
What am I?
Even though
I know that
it carries a symbol of the devil and the cuckold.
What?
It's probably unintentional, probably.
Wait, are the horns like intentionally like echoing both cuckold and devil horns? Or?
That's what it would have meant at the time.
Oh, man.
Honestly, the hype have nothing on this guy.
You show up to a party at Maximilian's, there's just him and his wife there, and he busts out that helmet.
What if Thisbe looked like that?
I thought about that today. When I saw that, Janine is who sent this to me. So
okay, of course, right?
Art, I say Art. Rob. Janine plays a character named Thisbe, who's a big robot who has like ram horns, sort of similar in description to these.
Just the grimace.
It's so funny. Also, it's understood that there was a little like vertical chunk coming out of the bottom of the nose that is apparently like intentionally snot. Supposed to be snot.
Oh my god. What the hell?
I don't know,
just the level of detail.
Somebody's gotta make a fan edit of Kingdom of Heaven where Edward Norton's character is wearing that every scene.
Love it.
This feels like it was meant to humiliate someone.
Agreed. And that's my thought. That's honestly my thought, is that, like, I mean, I'm not an expert. I would bet that other people had that thought first, comma, but.
This is a Habsburg Maximilian, right?
It must be, right? Yeah.
Oh, it's Henry VIII. It's Henry VIII. Oh, okay.
So it's actually not. So it's actually
oh yeah, people hated that dude.
Right, so that's the thing, right? It's
That's definitely a fuck you.
That's what I would think. The horned helmet of Henry VIII.
Hey man, got you this wedding gift for you and Anne. Hillary Mantel, you got to write a fourth book. Cromwell's Revenge. Dear Henry, since you took my head, I thought I'd give you one. I thought I'd give you one of your own.
Yeah, befitting your stature.
Oh,
And that is
the website.
Mm-hmm.
Got as far as time and hit enter.
Close enough.
Okay.
Isn't it nice to think that tomorrow is a new day with no mistakes in it yet?
Is that you or are you reading something?
I'm reading today's quote.
What? That's Lucy a depressing ass quote. What the fuck, Time Down is?
Yet.
Yeah. It's the author of Anne of Green Gables.
Those are depressing ass books. Lately, I've been thinking about some of the bizarre subplots that unfold in the Disney show Avonlea.
I've not seen Avonlea.
You ever read or watch Anne of Green Gables and I wonder what the whole story is about that town on that island?
Wow. I see.
Now, through Avonlea, you can explore the rich backstory of Avonlea.
Is this based on like additional novels, or is this just fanfic?
I don't think so. I think
elevated?
I think it's basically fanfic.
Which, again, I have no problem with fanfic, but I do think I'm curious to what degree this is someone coming into this IP and going, aha, I know what is happening.